Going to begin with a series of questions and with an ear for both common patterns among all of our guests as well as unique directions that you all have taken. And the first question, and I will begin with maybe, do we know which order? I guess we'll start with Noelle and then Ilse and then Lisa. So starting with Noelle, what got you interested in your career? And what was the biggest influence that led you to pursue your career?
Hi. So I think this is a really great question, and I'm kind of interested to hear what some of the other panelists have to say. But I would say that I've been interested in various aspects of science probably as early as I can remember. I'm not really sure why. I think I just was that annoying kid who liked to ask lots of questions, and when people got tired of finding answers for me, I just went out and found them myself. I think that kind of continues into my adult life where I love to ask questions, and if I don't know the answer, I like to kind of research it and find out for myself. I think particularly I have, early memories of being in high school and taking advanced placement classes in the sciences, and really just loving the lab part of science in particular. And then finally, when I went into my undergraduate career, I had no doubt I wanted to do an undergraduate with a focus in biology and, a second focus in chemistry. So I was like a dual biology and chemistry major. And I really, every year, I kind of loved both sciences and I really didn't know what I wanted to specialize in. And I had the opportunity in my third year of college, because I came in with a lot of college credits, to take on a research project. And I'm sure it'll probably come up later in the talk, but I was very well mentored through that project by a female scientist who still plays a huge role in my life today. And so she kind of introduced me to what it was like to ask a real research question, following the scientific method, obtain results, and then work on getting a publication for that result. And then so like my original plan of graduating and going to medical school was kind of curtailed a little bit because I was really interested in research. And so after that, I went on to work for 2 years in a dedicated research space. And, finally, when I was ready to pursue like an MD, PhD, I really knew that I wanted to kind of follow that research directive. So I don't know if it was like one specific event, but, more so that drive of asking questions and trying to find out answers, really enjoying my science courses, and then probably the mentorship specifically that I got as an undergraduate from a female in science who showed me that she could be a mom, she could be a scientist, she could be an educator, she can be all of those things, and she loved it. And just that the purity that science has of kind of maybe knowing the answer to a question that the rest of the world doesn't know because you haven't shared your results yet. I think there's just something that's really blissful about that. So I'd say that those are probably the most defining parts of my early career, my early introduction to science that stand out.
Great, thank you very much. Ilse, I'll ask you the same question. What got you interested in your career, and what was the biggest influence that led you to pursue it?
Well, so I'm probably the only person, or one of the only people that you may know, that ended up working in a STEM field who didn't love it when I was growing up. I was not a fan of science. In fact, I'm the daughter of a mathematician, and just despite my parents, I wanted to go in a different direction. So having grown up in Belgium, the educational system in Europe tracks you early on. When you're 12, you're given a number of aptitude tests to see where your strengths are and what you may be interested in and what you could reasonably pursue. And I had a passion early on for languages. I just loved learning about culture and anthropology and ancient civilizations and the languages that went with it. So I got tracked to study Latin and Greek. And I just plugged through that my whole high school career. And when I was 18 and getting ready to graduate, my father, who was a semi-professional cyclist, got in an accident on his bike. He was riding in a group of probably over a dozen cyclists, and it's kind of like dominoes. When one falls, they all fall. So the whole pack went down and he hit his head on a curb. And so he was transported to the hospital, spent 3 weeks in a coma, and then started this really long recovery from what was acute brain trauma. He was diagnosed with Broca's aphasia, which is damage to the area of the brain that allows you to form words and you know, basically speak. It's the physical act of speaking. So let's say that, you know, I'm sitting at a table, someone with Broca's aphasia would want to say the word table, and they know that it's a table, but they can't physically articulate the word table. So as this was happening, and I was getting ready to go to college, I became fascinated about what was happening to him and what was and wasn't known about the human brain and the biology behind it. And I had never in my life heard of a neurotransmitter and what that was and how that could impact your behavior. So my original plan had been to go to college and study psychology and become an interpreter and work at the United Nations. That was my plan. So in light of this event, I decided that to fulfill my minor requirements, I was going to take a couple of science classes and maybe take a neurobiology class so that I could learn more about what was happening to my dad. And I took my first bio class, and that was it. I absolutely loved it. I loved every part of what we were learning. It opened up my world about things I didn't know about human health and biology, and yes, also the brain. So I thought, you know what, this is way more interesting than psychology. And so I switched my major after one semester, and I sort of haven't looked back since. And through college, my research interest in science have evolved from basically pure biology to more the biology of human behavior, which ties in with, you know, the early events that shaped me in this direction. So it has been a wild ride. And if you had asked me when I was 17, 18, not for a million years would I have said someday I will be biology faculty of all things. But it's, you know, events in your life have a way of shaping you in a certain direction. Certainly, it's been wonderful. I have learned more about the human body, human behavior, the human brain, and how it impacts how we interact with others than I ever thought possible. So I haven't let go of that early interest in psychology, which is also one of the reasons I'm teaching, but it has certainly been an educational journey.
Great. Thank you so much, Elsa.
Yeah.
And our third panelist, Lisa, again, the question is, what got you interested in your career, and what was the biggest influence that led you to pursue it?
Okay, this is a long question. I'll start by saying that my parents were immigrants from the Philippines, and they grew up very, very, very poor. My dad, he worked on a farm. Well, they self-sustained, and so his family was able to feed themselves through their farm. My mom grew up in a family that was in education. They had a high school, a Christian high school, the first in its area, that was built right around their house, literally. So she grew up surrounded by teachers and that kind of thing. When they each came to the United States and met, then they came at a time when Central California was very prejudiced. And so my dad had to work in the fields, even though he had a chemical engineering degree. And even though my mom had a university degree from the Philippines, she also had to work her way up and prove that they had to prove themselves. So that sort of sets the stage for where my career direction began. They always encouraged me in the arts. Filipino culture, you know, is very much about music and the arts. Everybody does some piece of that, even though they all have their regular job. So that without a question, they let me do that. But they always said, you know, when it comes to life, you know, they being, you know, the ethereal, they can take everything from you, but the one thing they can't take from you is your education. So with that in mind, I always had the idea that I just needed to work hard enough and do well enough in school so that I could make enough money so I wouldn't be poor. Given that backdrop, my younger sister was developmentally disabled, and I'm the oldest of four, and that kind of steered me into the direction of doing something for underserved or underrepresented communities. My mom, she was a social worker, and she was also the director for for the Center for Abused and Neglected Children in Kern County. And that really set the tone for whatever it is that I do. I want it to be for people who maybe can't do for themselves. But I was always really, really good at math and science, winning competitions and that kind of thing. And all of the test scores, you know, told me that I'm supposed to have a high aptitude in that. So I naively went into the field of computer science simply because I had my best friend's older brother was in it, and it was a lot of puzzles. And I liked playing video games. You know, I had the first Nintendo and could get really obsessed with those kind of logic puzzles. So jumping into the computer science field, because all of the tests and everything and everyone is saying you should be good at this, that was really, really difficult, because to learn how to program is a complete shift in logic. It's learning a language. It's not simply doing, you know, arithmetic. And it's one of those things where if you're not used to being confronted with error after error, and, you know, the computer, you know, telling you that you've done something wrong, but you don't know what was wrong, like there's also this socio-emotional component to learning how to program that I think if you're not already comfortable working in that kind of an environment, it can feel very, very oppressive. And all the tools that we have today to help people learn how to code and that kind of support, it did not exist in 1998. All I had was a blue screen with white text and a lot of questions and no internet really at the time. So that was a big challenge. That being said, then there's this other side of my life, which is the music and the arts. I've been playing the piano since I was 1.5 years, and then picked up guitar and violin and, you know, different things. And so when I was in college, 2.5 years into my computer science degree, having sort of like this quarter life crisis, I decided to get a minor in music. And UC San Diego has this really experimental avant-garde flair to it. And I sat in on one percussion concert where they were playing a piece by John Cage, and there were a bunch of Hershey cans in the front. And I thought, like, oh, you know, this is going to be a fun little thing. There's a toy piano on the side. And then these conservatory trained musicians just battled it out in a way that was so profound to me, because they were doing something highly intellectual and highly passionate, and they were working together in this way that I'd never seen, I'd never imagined was possible through these kind of found instruments and found sounds. So that sort of something clicked in me, and I started to take more music classes. I started to enroll in the computer music classes, and once I could see how computers could serve my passion for music and the arts, then I was golden. I had been in my degree program as kind of like a middle road student, just trying to get by. And once I could make that connection to the arts, all of my grades shot up. And then by the end, I had what was almost a double major in music and computer science. And I turned right around and got my master's in music after that. Being in the field of the arts, of course, you know, we all know that it might not pay very much, you know, to have a really lucrative job in that field. So I always had my computer science degree to fall back on. But I also was beginning to see that my younger sister was taking music therapy, and her ability to speak and her volition, you know, to be connected to other people was going up. So I started to make connections between music, avant-garde thinking about performance and technology, and then went and pursued my degree at the School of Arts and Media Engineering. And then my focus became on how do I bridge technology and aesthetics and design in order to serve folks with disabilities. So that was my starting point. And from there, I ended up going into teaching things like game design and interactive art and sound design. So those things all came later, but that's the core of why I took the direction I did.
Thank you. And in all of your responses, what's obvious is that you let yourself, the thing inside of you that you're most natural and most excited about, drive you, which didn't mean that you weren't open to what was around you, but you didn't let those things determine your direction. You let the thing inside you click, as you just said, Lisa, something inside me clicked. And all of you were talking about sort of from an inside out process. At least that's one of the things that I've heard. So we're going to move on to the next question. We're going to start with Noelle again. And that was something that you touched upon. We want to hear a little more. Who were your role models growing up and why?
So, I think especially it's important for women in STEAM because I think at that professional level, you can feel a lot of great pressure to pursue a career, to become a mom, and you kind of have that double standard that you have to live by. So I think one of the most important things that women especially can have is, just some other high qualified women, some other women who are in similar situations that can kind of mentor you, whether it's through the life ladder or the career ladder. I think both are important because I think that it's very important to find that work-family balance. And I think that's something personally that I struggle with in my own life. So I think just kind of having these role models in your life are very important. So I think that I was fortunate enough in my own life to have a lot of great role models. Of course, I'll start with, my parents, my family in general, my mom especially. Hi, Mom. I think she's on this call. And she's still supporting me now to this day, even though I'm grown with my own family. And I just kind of think back, I reflect on what I do now as a mom and, what my mom did when I was growing up. And I just think of how she dedicated her entire life to our family. Something that has been very challenging for me as I move up the career ladder, especially, finding that work family balance is very difficult to do, especially I think when you're a woman in STEAM. So I think I took a lot of that for granted growing up. I think most of us do. Because I didn't really know how much she actually gave up for us. And I think now as a mom, it's pretty evident to just kind of see how truly amazing she is. I think at the professional level, starting early in my undergraduate career, I definitely had a woman in science. She was a young woman at the time. She's actually still a mentor of mine to this day. I work with her. She's now a colleague of mine. But she welcomed me. We didn't have a research program at the school I was at, but she saw that I had an interest in it and I had the time to dedicate to it. So I was very lucky to have a chance and an opportunity to work with her in her lab. And I think when you take classes, whether they're field experiences or internships, you get to learn a lot about the person who's mentoring you for those programs beyond the classroom. So I got to learn about who she was as a person. She was also a mom. She had 2 young children at home. She, supported herself while she was going through graduate school and then as a postdoctoral, and just kind of how she balanced that. So we just kind of had conversations about that. And she mentored me on applying to different schools. She mentored me to, if I was interested in research, that I should kind of pursue it for a little bit longer to make sure that it was something I was truly interested in. And then so when I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I was able to start working in a research lab. I actually worked for a NASA space radiation laboratory. And again, I was super fortunate that the head of the lab was another extremely famous female scientist. And she was another huge mentor in my life. Again, just kind of showing me how she balanced her work life with her family life, and just kind of talking me through the steps that she had to go through to pursue her PhD and some of the challenges she had to overcome. And I remember I was applying to a bunch of different MD, PhD programs, and she was, of course, writing plenty of letters of recommendations for me. But in the interim, my nephew had gotten really sick, and he was diagnosed with cancer. And it was a very traumatic time in my family's life in general. And at that point, I was just like, I don't want to do this. I just, I'm not ready to go to graduate school. I can't even be thinking about doing something like that right now. And she really mentored me through that time, that this is exactly the right time to be doing that. Think of everything that he's going through and how you could be so helpful. And she actually kind of gave me the focus of going into cancer research, and that how I can start to ask those difficult questions about why did this happen and how did this happen and how can we prevent it from happening in the future. And that kind of really, I guess, goes also back to that first question about shifting my career and, you know, my focus of study, and it kind of gave me a new passion for what I wanted to do. And so I definitely was very fortunate. And then through graduate school, my PI mentor, probably the first male mentor that I had in my life, was also he's very supportive. And the one thing that, you know, besides being a great mentor for science and for the program that I was in, he every Friday, he made it a point that at 4 o'clock, whatever we were working on, we put it down, we came together, we had some snacks, some beverages, whatever those beverages may be at that time, and just had a conversation. How did the week go? How do we let it go? What's going on for the weekend? Just kind of decompress for the entire week. And it was really nice. You know, it was just nice to kind of just get out of that focus, especially when you're in graduate school and you're working really long hours in the lab. And things are never working, as they usually don't. And just that he took that time out of his schedule, and it was important to him that he met with everyone, and we just kind of hung out and had a really nice time. So so I was lucky to have a lot of really great role models, and they're still important role models. I think that's the other thing about role models, is they always remain role models for your entire life. So, you know, my mom still supports me. She helps me take care of the kids, and she comes to all my talks that I'm giving. And Dr. Maureen Sands is a colleague of mine now. She is one of the faculty presidents. So she's been a huge mentor when I started my early career as an adjunct, and then as a professor on the tenure track position, just kind of getting all that stuff set up that they don't, all the stuff that they don't tell you when you sign in to become a professor. So I'm very thankful for the mentorship that I've received my entire life.
Thank you. Let's move, take the same question to Elsa. Who were your role models growing up and why?
Okay, so I am going to list 3 of them actually, because they were all influential in different parts of my life. And when I talk about growing up, I don't envision just childhood. To me, you're growing up your whole life. I think I did my most significant growing up in my early 20s, because that's when I matured the most. So these 3 people, out of the 3, I've only met one of them actually, and that was my grandmother. So that was my earliest role model. My grandmother she helped raise me in a significant part, but the reason she was such a role model is not because of her career or what she did, because she didn't work outside the home, but because of her quality as a human being and what she was able to project into the world. She had this quality that would just make you want to be around her. We have a word for that in Dutch. It's called gezellig, and it doesn't have an English translation, but it means any situation or person or circumstance or feeling that just makes you feel connected and safe and harbored and valued and seen and heard. And if I looked up that word gezellig in a dictionary, her picture would be right there. Wow. She just embodied that. And it is the kind of person, you know, when she was in a room, you'd want to be there, that kind of thing. So that was important to me, because I thought that's the quality that I want to project into the world when I interact with people. She used to tell me, you know, whenever you meet someone, make sure that when that meeting's over, however long it is, sometimes it's a minute, sometimes it's a lifetime, that they feel better for having been with you. And that stuck with me my whole life. You know, because there's many ways to be in this world. You can be in this world in a negative way and be antagonistic, or not. So I think that was my first role model. The second was the role model that drove my career choices to go to graduate school. And I later changed my mind in that direction, but that was Dr. Oliver Sacks. He is a very well-known neuroscientist, actually, not neurologist. He's British born, and he eventually taught in California for many years. But he is really well known for conducting experiments in and around the human brain that are very, very simple and just beautifully elegant in their simplicity. And he wrote numerous books. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Awakenings with Robert De Niro and what's his name? Robin Williams, thank you. That's whose book this is based on. So he wrote books like The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, and he did experiments that illuminated really complicated concepts in neurobiology with things like a Q-tip and a mirror. I mean, he was brilliant. So I thought, neuroscience is extraordinarily complex. And the reason I didn't pursue it in graduate school the way I originally intended to was because it involves way too much physics for my taste. All those neurons and those synapses, and oh, no, thank you. I'm not about pathways. Lisa, hats off to you. So I was always more interested in the behavior side of biology, but seeing how he performed very elegant experiments in a really simplistic, low cost, impactful, meaningful way, that was important to me. And I thought that science very often gets marred in the terminology and the technology and the complexity. And sometimes you just need to bring it back to what's basic. And I actually, he's passed on now, but I actually emailed him in 1998, I want to say, and he responded. I couldn't believe it. Actually, we had a very brief, this was when email was like not a big thing. So I'm really dating myself here, but we had just a very brief exchange about, just keep it simple, stupid. If it doesn't need to be complicated, it doesn't need to be. And then the third role model is Maya Angelou. I think from a human perspective, she is able to how do I want to say this? Clarify emotions that sometimes we don't even know we have, or that there are no words for. I mean, I think she had just extraordinary gift to look into the human psyche. I mean, my office, if you saw it, is littered with quotes from her books. I think she was just an extraordinarily beautiful soul. And to me, that's an important part of the human experience. So that's it, those three.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Moving on to Lisa, who were your role models growing up and why?
So my main role model has always been my mom. For the reasons that I talked about before, she was always in social advocacy, the way she conducted herself in the community, her ability to speak, it just really grounded me to know that what I wanted to do was going to be to really serve people who needed my help. Once I got into college, it was tricky. I didn't really have a lot of what I felt were role models. The field of computer science is very heavily dominated by male, white men. And so I was constantly searching, and there happened to be one woman who was Chinese American, who was teaching an intro class. And even though, when she would teach, it felt like jargon, I still felt like, okay, well, because, she's Asian American and she's doing this, then perhaps I can do it too, even though it felt like swimming. She ended up taking me on as a TA, and then I learned how to teach other people the thing that I struggled with, forever. And by beginning to teach other people, I really began to learn the material, and I learned how to communicate about the material. The shift or the pivot into music came when it was a similar thing where I went in the direction of percussion, but the teacher that I had who was doing music theory was Taiwanese. And I just thought, oh, how is it that there's this Asian woman who is playing the drums? Like, that's kind of cool. Maybe she can teach me the bongos or the kit, right? Very, very naive, with regards to that particular music program. But she took me on, and she just showed me the ropes. And she didn't treat me like I knew nothing. She didn't treat me like a novice. She treated me like an equal. And I had no idea what the caliber of the musicians playing there were. So Steve Schick was her mentor, or the faculty at UCSD, but he's sort of like the supreme percussionist in the world of contemporary music, just this incredible, brilliant human being. And after a year, I had been playing, and I had taken second place in the La Jolla Symphony youth competition. Then Steve, my mentor Ayun, sort of introduced me to Steve and said, it's now time for you to learn from Steve. You're at that level. And he took me on again in the same way. He never treated me like I was new to it. And I think that was really important, the apprenticeship aspect of being able to kind of like make that leap into from not having any kind of conservatory training into this much higher level of performance. And then from there, I discovered other mentors that I've never met. Just like Ilse was saying, there were a couple composers, Alvin, Lucier, and John Cage in particular, that stood out to me. Alvin Lucier, because his pieces were prose, and they were not imposing anything. Instead, he would create a situation which would reveal something about the environment, or something about the sounds, or something about some other medium that was not him. So his compositions were not about himself, but they were about the world. And the same with John Cage, and he's got that seminal piece 4:33, 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, but truly it's just a framework for listening. And within 4 minutes and 33 seconds, what you hear in that moment is what you have selected as the music that's out there. So I've always found those two composers to be just striking, and also inclusive in a way that some types of compositions are very exclusive. And then the final really strong role model that I discovered is Temple Grandin, who is a scholar. She has autism, but what's amazing is she can speak about what goes on in her brain in a way that can help anyone, especially educators and designers and technologists and the sort, figure out how to create situations that are going to allow people with autism, or people who are having trouble speaking and making that connection between head and heart and mind and vocal production. You can design systems that respect these types of thinkers, and then you can activate their voices in a way that we can then all benefit from their perspective. And I think that for me, that was the huge shift, is the focus on disability as the other, and we need to fix people, versus kind of separating out the things that can make a disability difficult and the things that can make the quote unquote disability beautiful. And so Temple Grandin has really been key in helping me see the world in a completely different way.
Thank you. Chris, do we have any questions coming in? I thought I would check in with you first.
No questions so far in the chat, but maybe let's do one more question of our panelists, and then we'll open the floor for Q&A.
Great. Well, then I'm going to jump to the question about career mistakes. Because as a career counselor, for many, many years, I've heard so many people be grateful for their career mistake. And so I want to ask you all, and maybe I should throw this just out, and whoever wants to start can. The question is, what career mistake has given you the biggest lesson? Ilse?
I'll go because it's a big one. Not in terms of its impact, I guess it's small, but so when on my merit path, when I decided to eventually major in biology and graduated with a degree in biology, I thought, now what am I going to do? I mean, here I am, fresh out of ASU, and I have this 4-year degree, and I'm supposed to be a biologist, except I don't think I actually know anything. And so, I applied to some jobs that were out there, and I landed a job at a lab, an immunology lab over here in Tempe, actually. And I started as a lab tech and very quickly worked my way up to lab manager, and all of that was going swimmingly well. And I hated it the whole time. Absolutely. The work was complex enough to keep me intellectually engaged, but I worked with machines all day, and I run ELISA assays all day. And it just I missed that human interaction. And I thought, I don't want to do this for the rest of my time. This was a mistake. What am I going to do now? And so someone that I was tutoring biology at the time said, have you ever thought about teaching? I said, are you crazy? No, why would I want to teach? And he has since passed on also, but he said, you're very natural at it. And you seem to like people. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't like people at all. I think they're fascinating and I like to study them, but he said, just think about it. So it planted a seed, and then what do you know? I went back and got a teaching certificate and taught for years. Even at the K-12 level, I taught juniors and seniors, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Who'd have thunk, right? So my biggest mistake was going in the direction that my degree pointed me in initially. Those are 2 years that, I know that had I not done that, I would have never found my true calling for working with people and passing on my love of science to people. Because when you're in your own bubble, you already know you love science and you know why you love it. But passing that on to people is the biggest compliment that my students can give me. And that's what I always look for. When they say, gosh, we just really appreciate your enthusiasm for biology. Good. That's why I'm here. So like you said, Marianne, your biggest mistake ends up being a huge benefit often down the road. I was no exception. It was the catalyst that pushed me in that direction, for sure.
Who else wants to answer that?
I'm going to piggyback off that because I think my situation is similar. I think I was always the type A person that had everything figured out for the rest of my life. And so when I went to graduate school and then I did the postdoc, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to do some adjuncting here because that's going to eventually help to get my faculty position where I'm going to run a lab. And it was the adjuncting in an education-based college that I realized I was like, wow, I really love teaching. Like, I really love working with students. There was that reward for working with students, that feedback that they give you, that constant dynamic environment that you're in. But I would never have thought that teaching, as being my primary focus instead of my research would be number one. And I kind of think about once I became a professor, I thought that all those stereotypes that the students kind of naturally have, this whole Gen Z, which is really the whole, like, one of my big background stories about why I think Gen Z is going to like save the world. But the idea that they come in, they have this, that they're lazy, entitled, self-centered, but in reality, they're really that do something generation. I think we're really fortunate enough to be teaching this upcoming group of students that I don't know, it just gives me such a reason for hope. I really think that they're going to be the generation that gets out there. They're so driven internally. It's just part of who they are. They're so internally driven. They have this global mindset on how they're going to fix global issues for the greater world, for the greater population. And, as opposed to just being American, they really have this whole mindset of being in a global world. So I think that Gen Z are really kind of exploring their differences and finding ways to collaborate that we never even thought possible. I mean, just think about going back to, I think, what Elsa was saying about sending emails. Like, now that's just, they know how to do that at like 1 year old. So just kind of this highly connected generation that they're in, that they're reimagining the world we're living in, and they're really trying to make it better for future generations. So, I think specifically in my lab with my research, trying to understand cancer and precision medicine involved in cancer, I think that if we really hope to make an impact in cancer research in general, we need to kind of break down those borders, and we need to know that it doesn't matter like where you live, what zip code you have. We're all entitled to treatment. We're all entitled to the best practices. And, I feel like we really need to start thinking globally about finding a cure for something, like cancer, or even now more relevant, COVID. How are we going to fix that if we're not working collaboratively? So I think kind of finding it's something that I'm so passionate about, just working with Gen Z. Like, I would never imagine giving it up. So stumbling into it by accident. But then just kind of something else that I always found is still something that I'm trying to figure out is being the yes girl. I feel like I'm always so excited if you tell me about a project, and I always want to be a part of it. And I think now, especially now, like as trying to learn in this online environment, it's just sometimes you just got to slow down and take a deep breath and refocus yourself and recenter yourself, and not overcommit to so many projects, because then you're getting home at 7 o'clock at night and you're not having time to kind of relax. And I think that relaxing is important, and it's important to have hobbies outside of your job. And so I think that that's something I'm still trying to figure out myself. But yeah, definitely totally agree with Elsa in that I needed that interaction with students, and that's really taken me to be a better person, and giving that passion of teaching science and driving that in students is exciting. It's exciting every day. I think I was dancing today. We were doing cellular respiration. I was like, this is amazing. so, I hope that the students, they see my enthusiasm, and then they'll get enthusiastic as well.
Thank you. Lisa, thoughts about career mistake that has given you a big lesson?
Sure. I think that one of the things I wish I had known earlier was how to turn off my internal critic, and just go for it. So if there's too much information from different people coming in, who might want a different piece of what you're doing or might have a particular view, even if you know that what your gut is telling you what you're doing is right. I think to be able to turn that off long enough so that way you can actually get your ideas pushed forward is really, really important. And then the other thing is, I tend to get really obsessive with the kinds of projects and things that I do. Like, I will work up to the wire, and learning how to set boundaries, so that way I can enjoy what it is that I'm doing and not just focus on the end game or the final goal. Getting comfortable with failure, that kind of thing. I wish that I had been coached in a way to understand and to appreciate the small successes along the way versus just going for the big thing at the top.
Thank you. Chris, questions coming in?
Yeah, we have a couple questions in the chat. I'll ask the first one. What 2 tips or tidbits of advice would you give to students who are following in your footsteps? Anyone can jump in on that. And while you're thinking about that, the other question that came in, and I don't necessarily, well, we could sort of modify the question is, what things could we do to engage and retain more women in STEAM fields, especially in the education side of it?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to take the second one first, if you don't mind, because I'll leave the first question to someone above my pay grade. But on the second question, since I teach at the community college, I have a lot to say on that topic. But the most important thing for me, and I have seen this play out in my professional life over the last decade, is people in science, and I say people in science, not just women or not just educators, are very proud of what they have done and what they've been able to accomplish in hanging in there in a quote unquote tough field, right? It's not for everyone. So we always say, you need to study so many hours. It's really just going into the sciences is just super tough. And I see a lot of educators at community college and otherwise at the university where I used to work who pass on that toughness to put other students through their paces, just like they had to. And to me, that is a fundamental mistake when it comes to the community college, because making a course or making a STEM field that is already challenging, unnecessarily difficult, just for the purpose of making a statement, just because you can, just because you had to jump through those hoops, now you want everyone else to jump through those hoops too. Not only is that to me ethically a little bit fishy, but at the community college level, it is our mission to make education, I mean, it's written in our mission statement, accessible and affordable. And I think when it comes to women, especially women in STEAM, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that they are juggling a whole lot of balls. And Noelle, I've heard you say it so many times how tough it is as a female in science, I think as a female in any field, to juggle personal responsibility, family responsibility, your desire to make something of your career and to spend your time and your effort there. I've often told my husband, you're great when I tell you to do something, but 90% of the mental work of this family is mine. And I don't think that we're an exception. So there are so many of our students who carry burdens that we can't even imagine. And making a field that is already difficult, more difficult, just because you're the keeper of the crypt, I think is counter to what we stand for as a community college. So to sum up the question, I think we need to lower the barriers to STEAM, not raise them. I think that is a very, very, and I don't have all the answers. I don't know all the ways in which we can do that. I'll leave that to educational experts, but I know it can be done. I know that there's ways to eliminate those barriers, if not significantly lower them, so that people can succeed in a difficult field without having to throw their whole remainder of their life out the window and focus just on a biology class. Because that's great in an ideal world, not so much in the real world. So I'll let someone else take the other question.
So I'll kind of follow that up with, but then answer really the first question, just some pieces of advice that I have. So I totally agree. And I think teaching with kindness and respect in treating others how you would want to, or how maybe there are experiences you had that are not pleasant. So I think that's absolutely crucial advice. I think something that might be a little bit out of the box that I would suggest for students who are interested in kind of pursuing any of these STEAM careers is don't underestimate the co-curricular experiences. I can't tell you how much of my learning experience has come from outside of the classroom, whether it was, you know, a research experience or I played soccer in college. So, you know, being a member of a team, you know, I always joke, and I said the best thing I did was marry somebody who's not in science, so that, you know, we have other conversations. And so that's been really helpful. I think making sure that you're taking care of your health and mental well-being. So, you know, exercise is a really important practice in our house. And I think that don't underestimate all of those things. You know, the learning will come, and you'll be trained to do whatever it is you set your mind to doing. I think that so much of your life experience are those outside of the classroom moments. So I think that would be maybe a piece of advice that maybe that a little bit out of the box that I would give. I think I'm very thankful for those experiences, you know, traveling and going to places that you've never been to, and trying new foods. And, you know, I think that all of that is how we learn and how we grow. And I said, becoming a mom made me 10 times a better educator, and kind of playing that role, it has made me so much better in my career. So I think that, again, all those experiences shape who you are.
It's really not so far out of the box. It's super important. And what it brings to mind, something I just forgot again. Does that ever happen to you? Oh, the idea to welcome the mistakes. You guys are talking about welcoming, or you're talking about accidents and mistakes and all of that, because that is often exactly what makes you valuable and different and set apart from other people in your field. Because they look at you and go, really? You have a background in XYZ? You're really helpful to us now. You were in marketing before you were in science? Well, we need a marketer here in this division, you know, that kind of thing. So it's all good, and it all works, and it's all going to be helpful. Lisa, were you going to add to the questions that?
Yeah, I was going to agree, first of all, with for question 2. I think I have been part of a system that was pushing a proving grounds, especially in computer science. I just happened to be really bullheaded, and I knew that it was hard to get into that degree. So no matter how hard it was, I was going to stick with it. And no matter how many professors cut down any kind of sociology course or, you know, anything else and said, well, if you don't cut it in here, then you can transfer to another field. I stuck with it, but I don't think that that is responsible. I think that actually creates so many more systemic problems. The culture. So when I teach girls how to code, I also educate them on the type of culture that they're going to go into, and let them know, you know, if you ever need any support, I'm there for you forever. And then the other thing about following in footsteps, I've stumbled time and time and time again, but I have always tried to remain open to different experiences. And some of those spontaneous things that you do, like traveling, like Noelle was saying, people that you meet, you know, that can really change your direction in a major way. You just, you know, so I suppose when you're going through all of the classes that you're taking, or you're humbling yourself and you're taking jobs that maybe you're not, you know, thrilled about, try and think about how all of those little pieces are just nails on your way to, you know, building the grand thing that you're going to build, which is your life. So just be open to all of the loops that, you know, that get thrown at you. Like the one that recently got thrown my way was that I had triplets 2 years ago. So that really changed my performance career and a bunch of other things. And the online learning, you know, it's very complicated. But nonetheless, what I'm saying is just be open so that way you can enjoy all that life has to offer.
Great advice. I wanted to comment, if I may, Chris, just to remind people listening, as well as you passing along to your students, that at PVCC we have free career counseling, including testing and career exploration activities and guided decision making. And it's all available through the counseling division. And I'm just going to give you a quick phone number. It's available not only to our current students, but our incoming students in our community. And it's 602-787-6540. And we also have a website on the PVCC page. Noelle, your students are a little far from us, so that might be a little difficult in New York, but locally, we'd love to meet with students who are exploring careers in the sciences, in the STEAM professions.
So we're just about out of time. If anyone has any, you know, parting shots, final comments that you may want to say, and then we can wrap up our call today.
You know what? I do have one parting shot, actually, and it was something Lisa said that caught my attention. When you work with students who code, or girls who want to code, or you're teaching girls how to code, and you warn them about the culture that they're about to step into, I tell my oldest daughter wants to be a coroner. She wants to work with corpses. Go figure. And she's heard me complain and moan about culture, and she's a little bit fearful of, you know, what's that going to be like as a woman. And I'm going to tell everyone who wants to do this the same thing. You define the culture. When you go into that field as a woman, you do not have to take what is thrown at you and take it at face value and go with it. You define what you want your field to look like, because as a professional, you are the face of that field. But figure that out for yourself first, and then pass it on to everybody else. That's it.
Well, it's been a privilege to meet all of you, and I'm grateful to have learned about the exciting things you're doing for our community and for our students. And Chris, I'll toss it over to you.
It was good to reconnect. So I have a long history with the Cuomo family, and so hi, Mrs. C, you're on the call. And Lisa and I have been friends for years through our music performance. And Ilse and I have worked together on the STEAM committee, so it was really great to bring all three of you on the call today. I had a great time learning more about each of you and what you guys are doing in your professional field. I hope our students on the call and those folks who will be watching the video of this later on who couldn't attend today can glean something from the conversation, and know that we at PVCC are supporting all folks who are interested in STEAM. Especially one of our goals is to really get those underrepresented and minority students involved in STEAM in any way we can. So hopefully we can do more conversations like these to get more folks involved.